Congressman, welcome back to Undivided.
Well, thanks, Brandi. I appreciate the chance as always.
Yeah, we always appreciate having you on and your perspective on these things. I want to start with like a positive, okay? Maybe we'll dig for one. Is there anything that the Trump administration is doing on immigration that you do think is going well?
Well, I think that the basic notion that the border is more secure is a positive. I mean, there's no question about that. And look, yeah, I'm not going to argue that under the Biden administration, mistakes were made that left our border not as secure as it needed to be. I think it's pretty clear. I mean, when the Biden administration came in and initially said that they were going to stop all deportations. Now, that didn't actually happen, but he did say it, and it put that message out there. And then, opening the border up widely to a lot of asylum seekers, all of them clearly overwhelmed us. But I am not fond of how far Trump has gone in the other direction. I mean, the lack of due process to deporting people without, any evidence whatsoever being presented to anybody, doing it unilaterally, and then targeting the undocumented population, whether they are criminals or simply tax-paying citizens working and being vital parts of our community. I don't agree with that approach, but I said it, the last couple of years that the borders were not as secure as they needed to be. We need to come up with better policy, which belatedly Biden did do. I forget when, like May, June timeframe of 2024. So yeah, we had a border security problem, but I'm not in love with the way that Trump is going about trying to address it.
Okay, I wanted to kind of take apart your last answer because I think you probably just misspoke, but you said, is whether you don't appreciate Trump targeting the undocumented, whether they're criminals or law-abiding citizens.
What I meant was,
Okay.
sorry, you're right. The clarification there is target the people who are criminals and threats to the community.
Okay.
Absolutely, 100%. It's just that he is also targeting people who are not criminals. And that's what happened with the Bellingham raid. People who were working, paying taxes, members of the community. So, and Trump had said that he was going to target criminals, target the most dangerous, and he had various words for that. So, yeah, so I would be clear on that. That's fine, but that's not what he's doing. And also, the lack of due process. And I say, well, why should these people get due process? Well, what people are you talking about exactly? If there's no due process and he says, well, I'm going to pick up criminal gang members and deport them. Now, that's fine. But how do we know that they're criminal gang members? You just have, basically someone in Homeland Security or ICE claiming it, and you've seen people deported incorrectly because of that. So I think that is very problematic.
Yeah, I think you and I could find some agreement on the due process issue. I mean, I am like a slave to the Constitution, and I think that, they do have some protections here. So, I for the gang members, the actual MS-13 who have done, untold horrors in this country and drug trafficking, it's not tearing me up inside to see them down in that max prison, to be frank.
Well, no, true, but we have to make sure that they are in fact gang members.
Yeah.
And that's the whole point of this. People presume guilt. It's like, well, they're gang members. They don't deserve due process. Due process is how we make sure that they are gang members and not just people being randomly picked up off the streets and sent to El Salvador.
So a couple things. I want to break apart the two issues, the criminal illegal aliens and individuals who are caught up in some of these other operations like what happened at Bellingham. So let's talk about the Bellingham one first, because I think that's probably where your position on this is going to diverge from a lot of our viewers and listeners. So you said, these are people who are working, they're not committing any crimes. From my knowledge of the situation and what the special agent in charge sat here and told us the other day is these individuals had almost all presented fraudulent work documents. So if I'm in the US, even as a citizen, and I'm presenting fraudulent documents to an employer, am I not breaking the law?
But are you a danger to the community? That's the thing. Trump presents this as these are people who are a danger to the community. They're going to physically harm people. They're going to steal from people. They're going to be a danger to the community. And that's what rightly gets people concerned. When you see, someone who's got multiple arrests, a long criminal record, and doesn't have documentation, committing a crime to harm somebody. This is different to my mind. And one big piece of this, the United States of America for decades now has relied upon undocumented labor in a wide variety of settings. And I have long felt that there should be a pathway to citizenship for those undocumented workers who we have here, who are, vital parts of our community. Whether you're talking agriculture, restaurants, hotel industry, construction industry, they've been a vital part of our community. I think there should be a pathway to citizenship for them. And I know a lot of your listeners will disagree with me on that. I do agree that we need to have a more secure border. We can't continually have people flowing across. Part of that is having a better legal immigration system. I mean, Trump isn't just blocking and going after the undocumented population. He's making it more difficult, to be a legal immigrant, to get in here. And even if you are, in some cases, they're targeting green card holders and permanent legal residents.
Maybe we'll get to those questions if we have time at the end, but I want to focus in again on what happened at the roofing company. So I'm trying to understand, is your position that you just don't like that those raids are being carried out while Trump said he was going to focus on the worst of the worst? Or is your position that we should not be, or I should not be conducting those workplace raids?
My position is that we should have a pathway to citizenship for that undocumented population so that these people are not in the situation that you just described.
But isn't that an incentive to come in illegally and work illegally if it could be a pathway to citizenship?
Well, if you have border security, if you have stricter asylum laws, and if you have a legal immigration process that allows people to come in legally, I don't believe so. Though I don't believe it is enough of an incentive to outweigh the positive of dealing with this. Because I think the negative is, I don't know what the numbers are late. It's over 10 million people in this country undocumented, at least last time I looked. The overwhelming majority of which are, working, making a living. In fact, there was an op-ed in the Seattle Times by a Trump-supporting immigrant who admitted, he said, my family came here undocumented. The reason he supported Trump is my family came here undocumented, but we didn't ask for anything. We went to work. We didn't show up and demand that you pay for my housing, you pay for food and all this other stuff. We went to work. Well, obviously, he went to work illegally, but it also helped build our economy. So I think we need to recognize that. And I think whatever risk there is of the incentive you described, that is less of an evil to me than having 12 million undocumented people in this country who are working, paying taxes, vital parts of our community, who are living under, in a non-secure situation.
Yeah, it's just I struggle. One of the things I struggle with that I think is a conflict with sort of the progressive and democratic view on this is, you say they built our economy, we have all these workers, but at the expense, is it not, of the American worker, and at the expense sometimes of those undocumented workers? I mean, I don't know if you read the article in the Bellingham Herald, this owner of this roofing company was interviewed, and he said something to the effect of, and I'm going to misquote him, but, people need to realize that the costs will go up if we can't do this, essentially. And I read that as he's basically saying he had to hire these guys because American workers would have been too expensive.
Yeah.
So here
No, it's worse. It's different than that.
Is it?
Okay. Yes, it is. And
Okay.
I remember speaking with a supporter of mine from down in Fife when I represented Fife,
Yeah.
was a farmer. It's not a matter of American workers would be more expensive. They won't do the work. They won't. As a farmer, literally, he trying to hire people, and he I mean, this was like 20 years ago, paying 20, 25 bucks an hour. So these are jobs that do need to be filled. And keep in mind, the unemployment rate is and has been very low in the United States for a long time. Now, if you get to the situation where you do have people taking away jobs from others, then yeah, that's a different conversation. But that's not really where we're at. The problem is we have too many jobs that don't pay people enough. There's plenty of people to fill them. So I don't agree that if you got rid of the undocumented workers, that what would happen is you'd have U.S. workers working there and get paid more money. You'd have, as we've had happen, crops that go unpicked because no one can be there to pick them. Restaurants to shut down because they can't hire workers. So, and that's a complicated sort of labor argument. But I think the statistics are pretty clear that the undocumented immigrants, contribute to the economy. They're not a detriment to it.
But certainly there has to be a line and a consequence when you see. I mean, I know that you wouldn't advise me to go into Canada illegally and present fraudulent paperwork to an employer to get
I
employed.
might.
Would you?
I'm just kidding.
I am sure. Although I think I'm half Canadian, so I think actually I would have a path there. But there has to be a
Yes.
line, Congressman. I mean,
Yes,
this
no, I
guy,
agree.
let me just finish. This
Yeah.
guy, more than half his workforce had fraudulent documents and was in the country illegally. I mean, there's no way that you're going to condone allowing businesses or just looking the other way when businesses are operating in that
Like I
manner.
said, I don't condone it. What I want is I want those people to be given legal status.
Just
I think a
given.
lot,
Just
and
like,
there was a bill 20 some odd years ago to do that. Not all of them. No, they have to meet certain criteria. Are you paying taxes? I think evaluate it and make a determination. These are people who are working productive, no criminal record, huge part of it. It's just the reality. We have these people. I think the last number I saw was 13 million people in this country who are working undocumented. So your proposal is that we should go out, find them all, and deport them all. I don't support that proposal for a variety of different reasons. One, I think it'd be devastating to the economy because we need those workers. Two, I think it would be cruel and wrong to many people who have come here and built a legitimate American life and are paying taxes. Their kids are part of the neighborhood. They're part of the neighborhood. They're volunteers. They're not committing crimes. I don't think that's good for America to target those people and kick them out. Look, we are a nation of immigrants, and a whole lot of those immigrants didn't, come over the exact 100% legal way. All right. And I think we've benefited from that. Now, you have to balance that against what you just said. You can't throw the doors open. And I do think that the Biden administration went way too far in allowing too many asylum seekers, doors too open, way too many people coming across for us to accommodate. But I think you have to balance those two things and not take the approach that Trump is taking, which is we're going to kick them all out. He's already blocking, refugees. He's pulled, what is it? I forget the status, but for Haitians, Nicaraguans, Venezuelans who were granted entry into the country, parole, humanitarian parole, I think is the phrase. 525,000 people just had that pulled. They erroneously pulled that from a bunch of Ukrainians until they realized they had sent it out in mistake. And so you had people being deported who they had to say, oh, no, sorry. Some, of course, were deported. So I think it's a balance, but I think looking at it and saying every single person in the U.S. should be 100% documented shows a remarkable amount of ignorance about how our economy in our country has worked from the very beginning right up to now.
yeah, and I want people to look at it with some level of nuance because, in the workplace raids, I know on its face, it's like, oh my gosh, these are people who are just trying to earn a living. But some of these workplace raids that ICE does, we're talking about borderline human trafficking, people who've been brought into the country and they're working, slave labor to pay off some debt for coming here. So there is a lot of gray area when it comes to ICE's workplace enforcement efforts.
And that's you're talking about human trafficking, but I think you would admit that this roofing company was not engaged in human trafficking or slave labor. I don't think there's any allegation that these people were like living on the streets working for $4 an hour. I mean, I think it was a decent job that was paying enough money for them to, have a place to live and, take care of a family. So I don't think that was the case. Yes, if you're talking about a human trafficking rate where people are, I'm pretty sure the case is the roofer was paying legitimate wages. He was, he wasn't, violating the Fair Labor Standards Act. He wasn't violating OSHA. He was abiding by the law as he was hiring these people. So
Yeah.
yeah, no, if you're talking about human trafficking, to have people brought in to work in the sex trade or whatever, yes, absolutely target that. But that's not what this was.
Yeah, I don't know, however. So I don't know if he knew the documents were fraudulent. I mean, more than half your workforce, that raises some alarm bells for me. But I also don't know that he paid those workers what he would have paid an American worker. I mean, we live in a state where they're all about like worker rights and increase the minimum wage. And it's like, well, I can't do that. So I'm going to bring in like immigrant labor who I could pay less.
Well, the minimum, but I don't think there's any evidence of that. I don't think there's any evidence that there was a whole bunch of people lined up outside of this roofing company saying, yeah, I'll take the job, but you got to pay me $5 more an hour.
But you don't have evidence that they wouldn't
you
take
and
the
I,
job.
well, there will be evidence shortly. because we will see how his roofing business fares now. We'll see. Are those people going to line up and take those jobs? They're open now.
Yeah.
And I'll take that bet with you. We'll
Okay.
check back in a month and we'll see how many people are showing up and willing to work for more money. And we'll see if that roofing business could survive if they had to pay somebody 50, $60 an hour.
Yeah.
So I don't agree with you in this instance. Like I said, if there's a human trafficking thing, if they're not abiding by labor laws and all that with you, but that's not what happened here.
Yeah. So you said in this letter, well, you signed onto it along with your Democratic colleagues from the Washington delegation, that raids like this make our communities less safe. So I want to talk about the raids that I would certainly argue, and maybe even you would, are making our communities more safe. I was out with ICE on a raid. Well, it wasn't a raid. It was a targeted arrest on a drug dealer who had pounds of meth. So you're in full support of ICE carrying out operations against criminal illegal aliens.
Absolutely.
Are you in favor of local jurisdictions helping them with those efforts?
I think we need to get to a better working relationship. Now, I will tell you, how long ago was it? I can't remember. It's probably 7, 8 years ago now. I met with ICE officials to try to get to this sort of understanding. I think it was during the first Trump administration. And they always say, we are simply targeting criminals. That's what they say. And I would try to drill down on, well, you did this, you did that. ICE is not very transparent in working with local law enforcement around here. I would like to see that relationship get better. I would. All right. But when they come out and say the only reason we want to know is we're looking for criminal activity, well, that's not really true. So if you are a local person who believes what I just outlined, that you have an undocumented population that we should not be targeting, and then ICE asks you to work with them to help you target that undocumented population, then that creates a dilemma. I would like to get back to a place where local government officials and local law enforcement feel comfortable working with ICE and Homeland Security, that they're on the same page about what they are doing. Yes.
Yeah, I just want to correct you, though. Those workers were engaged in criminal activity. I mean, if you had any other workplace in America that had that level of fraud going on, I mean, fraudulent documents would be a crime if I presented it to an employer.
Yeah, fair enough, but that's not what I said. ICE, again, was talking about they target people who wind up in the county jail and elsewhere because they committed more traditional crimes, property crimes, crimes against persons, crimes that directly threaten the safety of the community. That is the way it's been presented, and that's not, in many instances, what they've been doing.
So when you say you'd like to improve that working relationship, does that mean that you don't support our sanctuary laws in this state as they exist?
I'd have to look at our sanctuary laws. I have not done that. I don't know what they're saying. I will say, just in general, I am not comfortable with the idea of any state saying that they're not going to cooperate with the federal law. I'm uncomfortable with the fact that we have those sanctuary policies that represent a division between state law and federal law. Now, I got to look into exactly who's doing what the state of Washington is doing, what the city of Seattle is doing, what others are doing, to see what makes sense and what doesn't make sense. I'll give you one specific example. Sure. And Danny Westney wrote a column about this a while ago, about how, we blocked for a while any deportation flights out of the King County Airport. And Danny correctly pointed out that we're blocking even if you were picking someone up who was a rapist or a murderer or whatever. I don't agree with that. Now you want to get into a discussion about, what I've talked about undocumented population that's only committing fraud to get a job versus people who actually threaten the community. I'm open to that, but I'm not comfortable with our state or any jurisdiction saying we're simply not going to pay any attention to immigration laws whatsoever. But again, I'm not going to make a particular judgment on the laws we have because frankly, I don't know the specifics of what is done.
Yeah. I do. Let me share. So I think a lot of the issues are information sharing, right? Where they run into each other in a way that I believe makes our communities less safe. For instance, and I was trying to pin ICE down on this. How can you? Because for instance, we were on this drug raid, and there was a drug dog there from a local police department who helped them sniff out the drugs and detect everything. And I thought, I thought you guys couldn't cooperate with each other on this. And he said they can cooperate with us on the criminal element, but on any element related to our immigration efforts, they can't cooperate at all. And so that made a little bit more sense to me. But one of the issues, for instance, that I would love reasonable Democrats to help advocate for is the information sharing with jails, the King County Jail, for instance. They won't tell ICE hey, we've got because they don't even look. So they don't even look. Like the State Patrol, if they pull someone over, they don't know if they're in the country illegally or not.
Right.
They have no idea, right? So the jails don't even know. There's no mark that says, hey, this person's here illegally that
I understand.
is awaiting a rape charge or something. So then ICE just has to, I don't know, wait for them, kind of guess when they're going to be released and hope that they can scoop them up before they are released into the community to commit more crimes. Would you support jails, prisons working with ICE to hand over criminals who have served time in our local facilities for then
In all
deportation?
likelihood, yes, but I would have to look at the details. I know one of the concerns of local law enforcement is, if they are thought of as ICE agents, it makes it more difficult for them to do their job. There's concerns about domestic abuse not being reported. There's concerns about various witnesses not cooperating because they now see local law enforcement as just another arm of ICE. So they will hide from them and not work with them. So I would have to understand that better.
Yeah, and I do get
You'd have
that. I feel like people think, oh, ICE is going to go out there and just round up people who have brown skin, and they're going to ask, if we allow cops to work with them, they're going to ask, anybody they pull over, what's your immigration status? And they're going to throw them in jail.
Right.
There's a lot of gray area between that and some of the work that ICE is doing. So
There is, but it's a legitimate concern. It is a legitimate concern that populations will be targeted, particularly now that President Trump has targeted people with green cards. He's targeted people who are permanent legal residents for a wide variety of different reasons. And not always, but hardly any of these people are going to know the ins and outs of the legal reasons why they're being targeted or not being targeted. So that is a very legitimate concern.
all right, Congressman, we'll leave it at that. We do appreciate your time and your insight, and we'll, I guess, we didn't bet anything in particular, but I guess we'll see how that roofing company does. We'll follow back up.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks,
Okay,
Brandi. I
thank
appreciate
you.
it.